Hi folks, welcome to RJA Impact. Today we're going to be relaying the goings on in the FTX SBF trial week 2. So take a deep breath, put the kettle on, feet up and sup a cuppa of your choice or something harder if that suits, as there is a lot to cover this week and I'll try to break it down as best I can. As a reminder, Sam Bankman-Fried, now 31, has denied committing fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy and money laundering in connection with his being CEO and founder of FTX and Alameda Research, all of which could see him released from jail when he's about 131, providing he behaves himself. Just before I delve into the matters at hand, it's worth noting Sam Bankman-Fried's parents, Stanford law professors Barbara Fried and Joseph Bankman, were also seen entering court this week, and they themselves are actually facing a lawsuit by FTX, or the liquidators of FTX, who claim they used the company to enrich themselves. That lawsuit claims the couple accepted a $10 million cash gift from their son, as well as a $16.4 million home in the Bahamas, and I've seen that stated as $18 million, but what's a couple of million between friends, hey, or family members? They're also accused of helping cover up complaints from the exchange's former attorney, and also helping the executives of FTX evade the necessary disclosures for political donations. So we had the continuation of the testimony by Gary Wang. Before I get into the first part of his testimony, let me just explain what an insurance fund is in the context of FTX itself. One of the things these exchanges do is to try and provide some sense of and actual security comfort to investors, and they do this by creating what they call an insurance fund. Essentially, they put some cryptocurrency or fiat money aside, and if there's an issue with a hack or some mistaken trade, etc., that might put investors' money at risk, they can say, we cover some percentage of deposits in case of one of these issues arising. FTX had an insurance fund. Wang was asked how they calculated the size of the fund, and the response is staggering. He said they calculated it by taking the total volume of trades of FTX over the past 24 hours. They multiplied it by a random number, around 7,500, and divided that figure by 1 billion. And the prosecutor asked if the number had anything to do with the actual number in the insurance fund, to which the answer was obviously no. Why on earth they did a calculation, therefore, is beyond me. It would have been easier just to pick a number out of a hat, wouldn't it? Wang also testified that the FTX customer balances were approximately equal to what was in the company's hot wallets. Well, sort of. There was an exception, and that is an Alameda sub-account with a balance of around minus $8 billion, which was excluded from the list of customer balances. In other words, to my mind, the FTX customer balances were nowhere near what was in the company's hot wallets. To my knowledge, there wasn't an accountant anywhere around FTX, so this sort of accounting was done all the time. Anyway, just to be aware, a little bit of that testimony was actually given on Friday late and too late for me to pick up in my previous week's update. We did have the first hone-in on the advice of counsel defence. So this is where Sam Bankman-Fried wants to say, I relied on what the lawyers told me and had no idea it was illegal. And the reason we got to that was because in a filing in the morning on Monday, SBF's lawyers said they want to rely on Wang's testimony. And this is specifically in relation to one of the money laundering charges against SBF. And it arises because Wang has told the government that he relied on legal advice in getting a loan of about $200 to $300 million from Alameda, which was used to fund venture investments on behalf of FTX. And because of this, Wang stated he had no reason to smell foul play. In his words, didn't think that the loans were designed to hide the fact that money was coming from Alameda, and didn't think the lawyers would tell him to sign something that was illegal. And to me, at face value, all of that does seem like a reasonable approach for the defence to take. In the filing, it goes on to say, Mr. Wang's understanding that these were actual loans structured by lawyers and memorialised in formal promissory notes that imposed real interest payment obligations is relevant to rebut the inference that these were simply sham loans directed by Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried to conceal the source of the loans. Before Monday morning, Judge Kaplan had ruled that Sam Bankman-Fried couldn't heap the blame on his lawyers, and the arguments over their legal advice could confuse or prejudice the jury. Diversion. In today's diversion, we're going to look at what Sam Bankman-Fried thought of his erstwhile lover, Caroline Ellison, and yes, we will get to her shortly, during their relationship. And from what I can actually gather, the relationship lasted for about 5 years on and off after they became work colleagues at Jane Street before they set up Alameda. Anyway, just picking out of the court documents, one note said that Ellison is not a natural leader and probably never will be. And at some point, he also sent to Caroline a list of pros and cons of being in a physical relationship with her. For example, he said he didn't think they would last due to his lack of empathy and the fact that it would be bad PR. He told Caroline, "There's a pretty decent argument that my empathy is fake. My feelings are fake. My facial reactions are fake. I don't feel happiness." There wasn't really too much on the pros side of his list. He did say he thought her smart and impressive, and I think he said, "I really like her." And he said that twice, so that made the list a bit longer, I guess. Anyway, those attempts at wooing her weren't successful, as they eventually parted in 2022 and Ellison cut off all communication after that. That's personal communication, I should say. They obviously communicated in respect of work. Her take on that was, "I felt pretty hurt, rejected. Not giving you the contact you wanted felt like the only way I could regain a sense of power." And it happened. On Tuesday morning, Caroline Ellison took the stand. She's now 29 and was made CEO of Alameda Research, a sister company of FTX. Even though she's wearing the baseball cap and large shade, it's really unmistakably her, isn't it? Here she is in halcyon days when all was good at FTX, appearing in a Where's Bankman-Fried picture. So what did we learn? Well, she had a salary of about $200,000 and a bonus of $20 million in 2021. That's a step up from the $3 million that was originally reported. Anyway, she testified that Bankman-Fried directed her to falsify Alameda's balance sheets to keep lenders at bay, and this was amid a downturn in cryptocurrency markets in 2022. So balance sheets sent to crypto lenders like Genesis Global Capital concealed the fact that Alameda had borrowed around $10 billion in FTX customer funds, she said. And she was instructed by SBF to draw from the fund's line of credit on the FTX cryptocurrency exchange to repay loans in June 2022. In short, that means take it from the customers. About SBF, she said he did not subscribe to rules such as don't lie and don't steal. Sam was a utilitarian who thought the only rule that mattered was doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people, she said. He didn't think that rules like don't lie or don't steal fit into that framework, she said. Apparently, Sam had a desire to be the US president at some point in the future. And on her own culpability, she said that being around that mindset made her more comfortable over time with taking actions at his direction, even though she knew they were wrong. She relayed that Bankman-Fried sought to cultivate an image as a smart, competent, somewhat eccentric founder, and relayed that he thought his low-effort appearance and hairstyle was very valuable. She said the fact that she was aware that the funds used to repay Alameda loans were ultimately coming from FTX customers put her in a constant state of dread. She'd been terrified the truth would come out about the cryptocurrency exchange, and that its ultimate collapse last year brought an overwhelming feeling of relief. Every day I was worrying about the possibility of customer withdrawals at FTX, she said. Between her and SBF, they brainstormed some ways, or multiple ways as she put it, to support the companies. selling a stake in FTX to Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was one way, and boosting its market share by getting regulators to crack down on the rival crypto exchange Binance was another. And there were tears as she described the final days before the FTX exchange declared bankruptcy. She was incredibly sad about the harm caused to FTX customers and employees, but that it had lifted the dread that was hanging over her. I felt a sense of relief that I didn't have to lie anymore. I'm sure that having more time on her hands to spend her 20 million probably went down well as well. Anyway, she was crying for a lot of her testimony and was handed a box of tissues at one point. One interesting point, and this is possibly about the inside connections Bankman-Fried may or may not have had with politicians, because Bankman-Fried told her that regulators had promised that a Binance crackdown was coming. And we do know that the Exchange Commission, the SEC, have sued Binance and Changpeng Zhao in June 23, saying that they've commingled and diverted customer funds, although they've denied the allegations, like Sam Bankman-Fried has. And I won't go into the last few questions because at the end of direct examination, even the judge said there were very confusing questions about different accounts and really wrapped things up for the prosecution. Quite how it's relevant, I don't know, but Ellison said that SBF thought his hair had been responsible for him receiving higher bonuses ever since working at Jane Street. In case you weren't aware, SBF espoused EA, that's effective altruism, where the idea is to give away as much money as you can charitably, and he made a big thing of this, and a lot of commentators used to say that he only drove basic Toyotas and Hondas. Well, Caroline Ellison said that they initially drove luxury cars in the Bahamas, but SBF thought it would be better for their image to drive the Toyotas and Hondas. So that's what that was all about. And so we had the cross-examination. So this is the defence's turn. And it was Mark Cohen for the defence who did the cross-examination, and he prodded Ellison into saying that Sam Bankman-Fried may not have known that FTX customer deposits were going into the Alameda-controlled accounts, even after FTX got its own accounts. Cohen also questioned Ellison repeatedly on whether she'd hedged enough to reduce Alameda's risk, and highlighted the loss that Alameda suffered on the UST stablecoin. All of this to me seems to be getting at, well, if only Ellison had done a better job, none of this would have ever happened. But neither of them have been charged for being bad business people, so I'm not sure how relevant that is. So that was in the evening, and then on the next day Caroline took the stand again, and almost immediately the prosecution had a "Objection, Your Honour, this is confusing" statement. And I won't go into the detail about what it was about, but there was lots of objections like that. Like I said, even the judge had said this is confusing about some of the lines of argument. Now, make of this what you will. I picked up a comment about the fact that Caroline Ellison was being examined by the prosecution by a woman, Danielle Sassoon. And there has been a theme of Sam Bankman-Fried treating her quite badly and using Alameda as an excuse for anything that went bad, hence Caroline being the culprit. Under cross-examination, Caroline's going to face questioning by at least one man on the defence side. And the jury are mostly women, as we saw last week. Like I said, make of it what you will. Anyway, under cross, we heard that Ellison had made a back-of-the-envelope calculation, hoping to predict the likelihood that using more customer funds to repay loans would result in the alleged fraud being exposed by a run on withdrawals at FTX, and that percentage was calculated at 21%. But at Sam Bankman-Fried's instruction, Ellison said that Alameda repaid the loans anyway. In one exchange, the prosecution actually claimed that Bankman-Fried was trying to bully Ellison actually in the courtroom by reacting strongly to her testimony. I've noticed several times since the lunch break that in response to the things the witness has said, the defendant has laughed, visibly shaken his head and scoffed. It's possible it's having a visible effect on her, especially given the history of his relationship, the prior attempts to intimidate her, the power dynamic, their romantic relationship, and I would ask that defence counsel tell him to control his visible reactions to her testimony. Now, the judge said he hadn't noticed this, but asked Bankman-Fried's lawyers to remind him of the appropriate conduct. And we were talking about the defence, weren't we? Anyway, Cohen asked Ellison about the relationship between her and SBF and what happened after they broke up for the final time, and that was in around spring 2022. She said she just avoided one-to-one social interactions and meetings, and she still participated in signal communications, work meetings, etc. Cohen tried to press her on whether she'd told prosecutors she only talked inside work when required, and she said she couldn't recall. And I'm going to stop there because there were no real additional points of substance raised by either the defence or the cross-examination in redirect. The defence did not land any blows or manage to undermine in any great way anything that Caroline said. And that's as much as there probably is to say as a takeaway on this week's testimony. I think the prosecution have done a really good job in bringing Gary Wang, followed by Caroline Ellison, to the stand. They were clearly making the points that Sam Bankman-Fried knew all about the use of customer funds, or the misuse, I should say, and he directed them in that misuse. Late Thursday and Friday, there were a couple more witnesses, including one employee who worked for Alameda and who was at the final meeting Caroline had with Alameda employees before FTX went into bankruptcy, and which was recorded. So I'll provide a very short update on that in due course. So as the hand of subscribe waves goodbye to the second week in the FTX trial, it hits the notification bell to remind itself that Monday will be the start of the third week. Bye for now.